Coaches, welcome to the Coaches Locker podcast with Chris Fore. Hey, I appreciate you being here. A little somber tonight. I got news a little while ago. Big Lou Fore. If you're here in Southern California, you definitely know his name. Lou Fore passed away earlier today. I'm recording this on Sunday, November 10th, 2019. I was watching a movie here with my family, Jaws, when I got a text about it, and I was just been a little sad since I got that, because Coach Fore was just a great man, one of the good men in coaching. I got to know him just about 5 years ago. He's been around forever. In fact, I'm going to read a little story I wrote about him here for Max Preps, but I just got to know him about 5 years ago. Like I said, I'd heard about him forever. He's been a legend forever. But about 5 years ago, I walked into a pizza place down in Corona, sat next to him, and introduced myself. I was on the board with Southern California Football Coaches Association, and Lou has served on that for a long time. I was a rookie to it, and the rest is history. Got to know him that day and started a friendship with the man, and man, I'm real sad by his passing. He came down with leukemia earlier this year, and it took him. So our condolences to Coach Fore's family. Great family. And I wanted to just start tonight. If you don't know Coach Fore, which many of you don't because you're not here in Southern California, but I wanted to read an article I wrote for Max Preps about Coach Fore. 2 years ago I wrote this, and it's titled, "A Few Keys to Coaching in the Same District for 43 Years." Charter Oak's Lou Fore shares what has enabled him to stay so long at his alma mater. My mom actually went to Charter Oak High School, interestingly enough, in the 70s, and Coach Fore was there. Anyhow, I'm going to read this because I think it's a pretty inspirational piece, to be honest with you, about the life of Coach Fore. Not because I wrote it, it's what he had to say in it that makes it inspirational. I've been tracking every single head football coaching change in Southern California over the course of the last 2 seasons. Now, again, I wrote this in 2017. By the time we kick off in August of this year, we'll have changed out almost 40% of the head coaches in Southern California over 2 years. There were 632 football-playing schools in Southern California in 2016. The Hacienda League has 6 teams. 4 of these teams will have a brand new head coach in 2017. One that will not is Charter Oak. In fact, they haven't had a new head coach since 1985. Lou Fore will enter his 32nd season as the Chargers head man. Fore is a dying breed. He started as a freshman coach in 1967 at Damien High School. After getting a teaching credential and married, he was hired by the Charter Oak Unified School District, where he coached at Royal High for 11 years before moving to Charter Oak due to a closure at Royal. So he has been with the same district for 43 years. What is the secret to staying in one place for more than 4 decades? Coach Fore said, "It's my home. I've been here since I was 15 years old and enrolled as a freshman. I attended Charter Oak from 1960 to 1964. My wife went to Charter Oak, and so did my son and daughter. Also my 3 sisters. It's where all my family has grown up and lived in the neighborhood." Coach Fore did get the itch to move to the college level back in the 70s. He wanted to explore the greener grass on the other side of the fence, so he coached at Chaffey College for 5 seasons in nearby Rancho Cucamonga. He enjoyed that opportunity and definitely grew as a coach. However, it involved a whole lot of juggling his schedule and a lot of speeding out of the high school parking lot to get to the college. As the years have passed, I've had some opportunities to go to the next level with coaches I knew, but my family security always bothered me from leaving. Even in the last 5 to 8 years, some pretty interesting offers have come from other schools in our area. But this is my home, said Fore. His thoughts about home also spill over when discussing his assistants. The standing commentary is they all either played for me or are related to me. What used to be was a staff of 3 varsity coaches, 2 JV and 2 Frosh, has today grown until 19 to 20 coaches. I also know that some schools have more than that in our southern section area. If you count up coaching experience of each coach, we have over 156 years of coaching experience at the varsity level and 18 and 19 years each at the JV and Frosh levels. As far as our lower levels go, only 3 of the 9 did not play for me. So like me, most of my coaches I've known since they were student athletes here at Charter Oak. The key to hiring them has always been watching them play and seeing them develop as young men. Also, after they are out of school, it gives you a great insight to their personalities and relationships. You can watch them and know that someday that kid would make a great coach. Each of them knows our program, what our expectations are, what our traditions are, what our goals we have each season are. Also, we all live literally just doors away from each other. My son is next door to me. My special teams defensive backs coach is 3 doors down from him. And across the street from him, our O-line coach lives there. Across the street from me, some freshman coaches. Around the corner, 2 other coaches, the Perry brothers. Thus, our families all know each other, wives and kids and family and relatives. That continuity stands out when compared with trends in other programs. Just in our Hacienda League, every school but Charter Oak has a new head coach. Only one is a 1-year returner. I think this makes it difficult for not only the players but their families also. They don't know what to expect. They don't know who to call and talk to or go to for help. Today's coaching title also comes with a lot of off-the-field issues and responsibilities. When kids see one coach leave for whatever reasons and they wait around for another guy to step in, they feel abandonment. They probably have had to deal with that at home. They shouldn't have to feel as part of the football program. We call it our football family. If you come into it, you're in it for life. We are home. It's a place when you knock on the door, they have to let you in. The football field is our sanctuary. For a few hours every day, a kid can count on coaches and players who support them and care about them. Every kid desires that kind of environment. I told you this was a great article. Coach Fore, you will be missed. You are a man among legends. So we're going to talk today about the season is over. Now what? Going to go to our intro here. Let's roll the intro, and we'll be back in just a moment with the next steps to take after the season is over. You are listening to the Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore, a place for all coaches to call home. The Coach's Locker Podcast is a part of the Football Coaching Podcast Network. Please visit footballcoachingpodcast.com to hear and see our entire lineup of top football coaches coming to you every single podcast with valuable information to help you and your program. The Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore exists to help prepare coaches to be hired for the job of their dreams and to provide coaches with dynamite resources to become even more successful in their field. You can reach me on Twitter at Coach Fore. That's at COACHFORE. And my podcast home is at 8laces.org/podcast. That's 8laces, EIGHTLACES.org/podcast. Welcome to the Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore. Now, let's get after it. Well, around this time every year, I get a lot of emails, tweets, texts, etc., asking what head coaches should do to recap their season or what we should do to start planning for next year. I've addressed this in a few different ways throughout the course of the last 7 or 8 years I've been writing a blog for the football community. But this is the first time that I've put this sort of a thing on a podcast here for us. Okay, so most veteran coaches kind of have their routine set. Okay, they know exactly the exact steps they're going to take once that season is over. They know the first thing they're going to do is this, the second thing they're going to do is this, the next thing they're going to do is this. They're going to take a break here. But some guys who haven't been around, they might not have that routine set for once the season's done. You know, what order do you do things? Do you collect gear? Do you meet with your coaches? Do you meet with your kids first? Exactly what way should we go? So, but this podcast here, we're just going to talk about a bunch of things that you can do to wrap up your season. And I think it's very important to do. There are some programs out there where coaches never really wrap up the year. It's over, they collect gear, they move on without really putting a bow around the year. I think coaches that do that are missing the mark in one big way. I think it's very important to wrap up your season. I'm always been a big believer in surveying my kids, surveying my coaches, so that we can keep moving the program forward, okay? And so I encourage you to do so. But let's talk about some things. First of all, obviously, you're going to collect your gear ASAP. The players will know and get into your routine as the head coach. After the first season, it becomes a little easier to go through that gear collection process because you have a routine. They know exactly where to go, what to turn in, when to turn it in, et cetera, how you expect it to be turned in. The players will know what the expectation is. For me, I always collected gear that Monday following our last game. I didn't mess around with this. Collecting gear can be an absolute headache. It's a sad day because you're turning it all in, but it can be an absolute headache, especially when it all lands on your shoulders as the head man. Some programs are lucky enough to have an equipment guy. They should count their blessings. I know Hesperia Unified, we had that. I didn't have to. I coached Hesperia Unified for 4 years. I never had to collect gear. The equipment guy did it. That was awesome. But what I would do is I would collect gear. I'd give the kids an extra 2 days of grace for anything they forgot. And then I would turn the gear over to the athletic director or the business office when I was at a private school. And so that's the rotation I got in. That's the way that I went about collecting gear. I collected it Monday, gave them an extra day of grace Tuesday, extra day of grace Wednesday. And Thursday by noon, boy, I had a list of all my kids who had not turned in gear, and we got that to the business office. Now, again, I was at a private school, so they could charge them, and it made life real easy for me. A little different in the public sector sometimes with that. My policy as an athletic director with my head coaches I've served has been, do your best to collect your gear for a few days, then give me a list. I'll take it on from there. Some of your athletic directors aren't going to be that supportive. That's a bummer. But I didn't want my head coaches dealing with this for months and months and months. So as long as, my coaches would do their due diligence to collect their gear, I would go ahead and take it over, at some point. That's the first thing you're going to do. Next thing you're going to do, you're going to want to have a team meeting. One of the traditions I had was we would have a team meeting at lunch Monday following the season. So we usually would thank the seniors at that meeting. It'd be like really focusing on our seniors, or right after school. So I found out lunch wasn't long enough. So we'd have that meeting right after school Monday. And some kids need to go on to basketball, soccer, but I would just always ask those coaches if we could just have that, have an hour-long meeting and then get them out to practice. Most of them were very good with that. And so, we would obviously, you'd usually lose to end the year unless you're winning a championship. It's usually going to be a loss for most of us. It's a good time to get the guys back in the room for one last time that following Monday. I would conduct surveys in the old days before online surveying. I would do that, by hard copy. And then I'd also have ballots for our awards voting for the end of the year banquet. And we do that all right there, Monday following the season. I walk them through how to do the ballot. I'd walk them through how to do our survey. And then, we'd pass out a flyer for our banquet awards night. Again, I'll be honest with you. I'll brag about myself. If there's one thing as a coach, I was very, very organized, okay? A lot better X and O's guys out there, but I could run a program. I was very, very organized that way. So the surveys, I would hand them a hard copy survey, and that would be due to me the very next day. And usually they would trickle in over a few days. Once we came up with, the geniuses at Survey Monkey came up with Survey Monkey, we would go have this meeting in a computer lab on campus, and I would be able to give them their surveys right online, and that was awesome. And we'd do it all at one time, bada bing, bada boom, on a survey. But that team meeting is important. Okay, so that's number 2 is a team meeting. And then 3, I got into my surveys a little earlier, but I would always survey my kids. Okay, and I've just found it's very, very important to survey your players. And the reason I like surveying them is because it's not my program, it's theirs, right? And I would want to ask them a list of questions to give them a voice for our program. Sometimes I found players have tremendous ideas. They have really great ideas. And so I want them to have buy-in to that football program. Also, another thing the surveys did is they would confirm that we were doing good things, I remember a kid once saying, Coach, you are doing everything right. Don't change a thing with this or this or this. It's not that we need a pat on the back, but it just confirms that, hey, we're doing the right things, okay? Some kids will write a paragraph. Some kids will write one word. But I really love doing surveys. Let me talk about an end of the season program evaluation I did. And you can write this down as I go. I've also got this up at coachfore.org, coachfore.org. If you click on or just search end of the season evaluation type of deal. So number 1, I would always ask, what did you like most about this past season? That's just totally open-ended question. It's amazing. Sometimes you get football stuff. Sometimes you get non-football stuff. The off-the-field type of stuff that they like the most. Number 2, what did you like least? Again, sometimes it's going to be those 2 open-ended questions right there. I think you learn really the most about your program and kids' take on your season right in those 2 questions right off the bat. Number 3, how did you feel about our practices? The length of practice, the dress. Usually we would go, helmets Monday, full pads Tuesday, Wednesday, helmets Thursday. That's kind of the sync we got into when I was a head coach. The tempo of practices, how'd you feel about those? Number 4, fourth question I would ask, how'd you feel about our pregame routine? Okay, I think that feedback is very valuable to the kids. I've shared it before, I think, on this podcast, but I inherited a program that went to Sizzler for years and years and years because our parent owned that Sizzler. And they hooked us up with a great deal. It'd be a steak, a baked potato, a salad bar for like $5 or $6. It was phenomenal. And we went there for a long time. But then the feedback after my first year as a head coach kept that same routine because nobody ever asked them. But the kids hated going to Sizzler. And I thought that was interesting because, again, they'd gone there for, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Nobody ever said a thing about it. But it came through on that survey the first year I was the head coach. And what they said made a lot of sense. They said this big old steak we have sits in our stomach for the entire first half. And they just felt like it was too much food. And so that was interesting. How'd you feel? In the question number 5, how'd you feel about our halftime procedures? Again, I think it's real important, whatever habits and routines your team is in for halftime, ask your kids, were those effective? I think doing some data on that too. How'd you do in that first drive of every half? Did you come out, guns blazing and do well? Or did you come out flat? What does your halftime procedure lend to in how you played in the third quarter? Number 6, how did you feel about the offensive system, installation of plays, etc.? How'd you feel? 7, how'd you feel about the defensive system we used? The installation, did you understand what you were doing? Number 8, how'd you feel about special teams? How'd you feel about it? How'd you feel about our punt, our kickoff, our kick return? Again, I've always received valuable feedback from the kids on these questions about X's and O's. A lot of coaches out there, I'll never ask my kids about X and O's. I don't care what they think. Well, if you don't care what they think, okay, you don't care what they think, and they don't like it, are they going to produce real well for you? Are they going to do their best? If they don't understand it, are they going to play effectively? 9, how would you evaluate the captains and the leadership of this team? I think that's a very important question. How would you evaluate the captains and the leadership of this team? Number 10, do you think the team as a whole kept focus on our theme and our goals this year? Boy, that's been very eye-opening. Some of the worst teams I've had, when you ask that question, they're like, nope, we quit in week 2. Captains sucked. Team lost focus in week 2 because we all did this. And you find out some big meeting they had on their own or some big party they had, and everybody, blew off football for the rest of the year, whatever it is. I would ask, in your opinion, did we accomplish these goals, the goals that we had for the season? Okay. Number 12, what did the coaching staff do that helped you the most as a football player? I want to know, what did we do that helped you the most as a football player? And then number 13, what did the coaching staff do that helped you the most as a person? I love this feedback from kids. I love being able to hear stories about, hey, Coach Bear did this with me. Coach Chamberlain took me out to lunch after my grandma died and explained this to me, helped me through the process here. So I think those are two very important questions. 14, if you could change one thing about your football experience this year, what would it be? I've had kids right there flat out right, I'm not playing next year because this happened. Okay, it's important to know about those things. And then 15, I ended on this question. If I were the head coach, I would, again, open-ended question there. And this data, folks, is awesome if you just, again, you can do this stuff online now, and it's a great way to do things. So that's number 3. We talked about surveying the players. Number 4, meet with your players one-on-one. At my lunchtime meeting on Monday, I hand out a schedule of when I'm going to meet with every single player one-on-one. And that's something I did. I was a coach. I coached high school football for 16 years, JUCO football for 1 year, 2017, 1 year doing that. Out of those 16 years, I was a head coach for 8, okay? Half my time as coach, I was a head coach. And this was the routine I got into. And every single year, all 8 of those years, I met with every single kid, okay? Freshman to senior, if I had 20 kids in my program or 80 kids in my program, I think it's about the biggest we ever got to, I would interview every single one of them. Not just interview, but I'd have a meeting with every single one of them. And I'd pass out, at this Monday meeting I'm talking about, I would pass out a form to them, okay? And that form was something, it would set up some goals that they wanted for next year. I would also get all their updated contact info from my database. I kept a database on Excel of all my kids. So I'd get, hey, cell phone, updated, back in those days, email. Now it'd probably be social media contact. But I would also ask the kids what winter sports they were playing. So if they were playing winter sports, I would meet with them usually at lunchtimes. But I would set up a meeting. It would probably be a 15 to 20-minute meeting with every single kid in the entire program. A few of the things I do at these one-on-one meetings, okay? I go over the results of the survey with them. If I feel a need, I'll ask kids individually about things I'm confused about. So, like, my surveys, I always had them anonymous, but if kids wanted to write their name on them, they could. And so if a kid did write stuff, I would always, if they did put their name on there, I would always review the results with their survey one-on-one with them. And that would help me to get, even more feedback or clarification. I would go over the goals that they set for the coming year. So I would have the kids bring their goals to me, their strength and conditioning goals, as well as their playing goals. Like if they had a goal to start at wide receiver when maybe they were a defensive back, the year previous, they didn't play much wide receiver. I'd try to dig into that a little bit. Why do you want to change positions? Why are you focusing on this? Again, just to kind of get to know them, their routine, their intentions and everything coming into the next year. Another thing that I would do, I would go over with them after my coaches and I met. I'd go over with them a preliminary depth chart, okay? So I would talk about the kids at their specific position. Like, hey, you were the backup offensive guard this year, the weak side guard. Chris was ahead of you. He's graduating. So right now, you're penciled in here to start at this guard spot. What do you think about that? And we talked through those things. Maybe I had a quarterback situation where I'm meeting with a sophomore. Okay, hey, you were the starting JV quarterback this year, moving up as a junior. You got a senior ahead of you. You want to start? You want to take his position? Here's what you're going to have to work on during this offseason. Here's how you're going to have to progress to beat him out. So I would show them that preliminary depth chart. Where they were at on that depth chart, what was in our minds as coaches. Hey, if we played a game this next Friday, here's where you would be and why. Okay, so this one-on-one time I felt was always very, very valuable. Give me some real good insight into the players' minds and hearts about our football program, and vice versa. It allowed them to see, I think just as important, it allowed them to see and look inside of my heart and mind about the program. The fifth thing to do, and these are not in a specific order per se, I would usually always meet with my coaches one-on-one before my players. A lot of reasons for that, which I'm not going to dig in too much. Sometimes it's because I wanted to let a coach go. Sometimes I was, wanting to make sure we secured a coach, that we had a commitment from him. Sometimes it was to get feedback, on their position group. That's the main reason I would meet with my coaches one-on-one first. But my meeting with the coaches usually lasts 45 to 60 minutes. I would evaluate each of them, a written evaluation of each coach. A lot of programs, they don't go that far. There's more friendly talk sometimes. That meeting, we could sit there for 2 or 3 hours at a restaurant. But, the football portion of it, my meeting part of it was about an hour of that. I go over the results of the survey that the coaches and the kids do. Talk about the differerences, like, hey, the kids said this, the coaches said this, that sort of thing. And then I'd go a little more in-depth on that survey results and what I saw, hey, here's some things I think we need to change for next year. If there's something that directly relates to them for that survey, maybe I did a survey. That's one of the things I do as a consultant through my company, 8 Laces, is I will survey your players. I do it, so you have a third party, and you can read about that, 8laces.org. I did one for a Division II program here in Southern California last year, and one of the things that came through in that survey was one of their coaches, they just had to let this guy go. I mean, he was very damaging to the program, and the head coach knew a little bit about that, but not everything. And sure enough, through this survey that we did, and I completed that survey data for them and gave them some feedback on some things I think you need to do to move your program forward. And here's some things your community's saying. One of them was let coach XYZ go, and they did that. So I would always go over any feedback that came in, even if it was positive feedback. I'd go over that positive feedback with them, try to stoke their fire a little bit, and encourage them. So we talk through some of those things and make sure there are no hard feelings if there's anything that happened during the year between myself and a coach, and just, hey, fresh start. I always ask my coaches how everyone's getting along. Usually you should have a good grasp on this at this time of year, but depending on how large your staff is, maybe you don't. So this is especially important, I felt, if you have multiple levels, different staffs. I give each coach a few professional goals that I would like for them to work on. Maybe it's a book to read. Maybe it's a certain clinic topics I really want them to focus on. It's another thing I do is I go over the clinics that my staff will, my budget will pay for. Like, hey, coach, we're all going to go to this clinic together in Costa Mesa. We're going to go to this clinic together out in Vegas. We're going to go to this clinic together down at Mira Mesa High School. Boy, that's an old school one. If you've been in San Diego for a long time. Old Bill Williams clinics were tremendous. Here's the 3 we're going to. If you want to go to any of that above and beyond this, you're going to have to pay your own dime. So, but we would, these one-on-one chats with my coaches were always a real precious time. I tell guys the right time to fire a coach, because I get that question often. The right time to fire a coach is immediately. I've only fired one coach as a head football coach. I've had to let a few go. That's a little different. Hey, we're just going to move in a different direction. I think there's, usually when you got to let a coach go, so to speak, there's a clear understanding of what's happening. And then you got guys you got to fire. From my experience, you let someone go, the writing's kind of on the wall. The other party is usually almost relieved when they hear, hey, they've been let go. It's just one of those things where things didn't work out. To avoid having to fire guys or letting guys go, spend your time hiring slowly. Many head coaches fire too fast, and then they get in a bind with it. But I've always believed in hire slow, fire fast. Hire slow, fire fast. But if you've made a decision at some point in the year you're going to let a guy go, you're going to have to fire a guy, do that immediately. And then the sixth thing I'll do at the end of the season, I'll have a state of the union with my coaching staff. So once I've met with all the players one-on-one, once I've met with all the coaches one-on-one, I have a meeting with the coaches as a group. Okay, this is usually about 3 to 4 weeks after the season. And, we'll come together. Usually I would do it, a few years I did it like as a Christmas party at my house where we would meet for 1 or 2 hours and then have the wives come over after that type of deal. Wives and kids, that was fun. But I would really encourage you to have that meeting before the Christmas break. And so it was a great time to reflect on our previous year and then talk about, what's coming up. Now, obviously, I say Christmas break. You can tell I didn't go too far in the playoffs very often. Couple years to the semis, one, CIF championship. But, usually, like most of us, well, I don't know about you, but it was, I took a team to the playoffs my first 4 years as a head coach. And then we missed a season or two and then back for a couple years in a row. But never played into December as a head coach, I don't think. I mean, semifinals was the furthest I ever made it as a head coach myself. So we would be able to get these meetings done by Christmas break, and I think that's real important. We might talk about staff changes at this coaching staff meeting. We might talk about, hey, we ran a 43 last year. We're going to look at, maybe going to an odd front this year. That's what we're going to focus on at our clinics and revisit this in the spring. Or, hey, we're going to, put in this new system, special teams wise. So I want you guys to get clinicked up over that. We'll talk about some personnel a little bit at that meeting. We talk about fundraising. We talk about politics in the program or in the community on campus. We talk about, hey, what other sports are you coaching? How can we support you as a person on campus or as a coach? If maybe there's a head coach from another sport, maybe he's looking for some assistance or, something like that. So I just think it's a great time to kind of get together, wrap up your year totally before that Christmas break, and then move on. Here's where we were, here's where we are, here's where we're going. So anyway, there's 6 things. I hope you took something away from this podcast on 6 ways to, end the year, 6 different things to do at the end of your year. I've got up right now on coachfore.org, an article called 3 Important Things to Do at the End of the Season. Real briefly, I talk on there again about equipment. I talk on there about surveying your players. And then I talk about getting your calendar ready to go. So there's 3 things there. Real briefly, I want to tell you about something I'm doing here on my website, 8laces.org. It's called the Coach Finder. Okay, it's called the Coach Finder. And the Coach Finder, here's what it is. Are you in search of a job change but need exposure to help you find that next coaching opportunity? Maybe you're looking for that first coaching opportunity. Are you a school in need of a coach? 8 Laces Consulting is proud to announce its new Coach Finder resource launching in the fall of 2019 hiring season. Chris Fore has built a strong reputation as a consultant since 2012. He helps coaches to rebrand themselves through his unique resume development process. He helps schools to find both assistant and head coaches. Schools from the high school to Division II of NCAA levels have reached out to Fore to help fill their vacancy. Coach Finder is a no-brainer. So coaches who need exposure, the process is simple. Coaches looking for more exposure pay a small fee. It's $19 to Coach Fore. You're going to set up a profile page to include your resume, biography, letters of recommendation, and your letter of introduction along with certifications and salary needs. Okay? You're not going to find another place online for coaches I know of where you can build this type of one-page profile, which allows you many attachments to best market your services unless you invest in building your own website, which we do recommend if you know how to do it. You might be concerned about your current employer seeing your profile page. Understood. Be assured that only certifiable employers, head coaches, and or administrators will have access to the Coach Finder profile page. Your profile is not publicly visible. Profiles are only visible to registered head coaches and administrators, which might include your supervisor, so be smart there. Suggestion is to let them know your profile exists. If you want a private profile, email us about this possibility. So you can start that process if you go to 8laces.org/coach finder. Again, 8laces.org/coach finder. Okay, and if you are a school who needs to hire a coach, this is free for you. You'll place your free order on same place, 8laces.org/coach finder. Then you're going to receive an email from me to direct you to fill out a short form to prove that you're a head coach or administrator, if I don't know you already. And then we're going to grant you free access to our national database of coaches. So if you need a head coach, use 8 Laces Coaching Consulting as your search firm. That's another thing I do. If you are an administrator listening to this, I've had one contact me already. In fact, just today, November 10th, 2019, I had an athletic director reach out to me here in Southern California asking me to help him out. So Coach Finder, I'm just launching this, see how it goes this year. $19, not very much money there. Put up your profile, allow coaches to search. You can put up to 5 states with your profile, and then I have a selection if you want to put it on more than 5 states. Cost a few bucks more. But again, check that out, 8laces.org/coach finder. Folks, thanks for joining the Coach's Locker podcast with Chris Fore.